and welcome to In Conversation. I'm Dave Kelly, Director of Advanced Media Production at Cal State Long Beach. Well, another year has gone by, so that means we have to take another look at recent activities and new developments here on campus. My guest today is Dr. Jane Close Conoley, the President of Cal State Long Beach. Welcome, Dr. Conoley, and thank you for joining us again on In Conversation.
I'm very glad to be here.
Well, you're now into your fourth year, about halfway through your fourth year here as president of Cal State Long Beach. As you look back and reflect on the previous 3.5 to 4 years, what are some developments that have occurred that you're particularly proud of and the public should know about?
Well, there are many. A few that come immediately to mind, I think, is the acceleration of high-impact educational practices for our students, and that includes an increase in international study, our large Bill grant that gives many more students a chance to work on research with faculty, a big increase in number of internships. All of that has come along with increased graduation rates, meaning a big jump in the 4-year graduation rate as well as the within 6-year. We have about an average now about 5 years to being enrolled time. So all of that is very, very good. I've also been delighted about the support we've gotten in terms of philanthropy. It's really helped us with so many things, increase in scholarship dollars as well as facilities. So there's, I could go on and on. It's been a very good last year and actually, building up over the past 3.5 years.
Well, speaking of the connections with the alumni, we'll probably have a chance to talk about that a little bit more later and the partnerships that we have here at the university. But before we go on, what about some things or some areas where you'd like to see perhaps a bit more progress? Can you think of some?
Yeah, we are in a different environment, especially in terms of building on campus. And so I feel like we're really challenged. Although as you look at our campus, you see building happening everywhere, but we aren't getting state dollars for new buildings, classroom buildings or athletic buildings. So we need from my perspective, a more streamlined, more efficient, less expensive, at the bottom of it, less expensive way to build, because we're having to pull together donor dollars and look for public-private partnerships. So that's, that's a big deal. And, another area is a constant concern about national influences that affect our campus. And so a rise in not hate crimes, but some hate speech, graffiti, that's very offensive. So that concerns me. I feel like we're doing a lot to combat it, but it's out there. And so the issues with DACA are in front of us right now, the renewal of that or not. And so that keeps me up a little bit at night.
Well, we'll have a chance to address some of those issues also a little bit later in the program. But as we talk about budget, because you brought up cost and expense and budget and so on, when we talk about higher education, inevitably we talk about the state budget. And we know that this year our budget for the entire CSU, which we're obviously a part of, but for the entire 23 campus system is about $6.5 billion. The Chancellor's Office and the trustees are looking for an increase of approximately $300 million for next year's budget, which would bring us up to about $6.8 billion.
Yeah.
And the key thing here is that students are actually paying for 46% of this through their tuition and fees.
Yes.
So that means that the taxpayers would be on the hook for about $3.7 billion. Taxpayers always want to know how their dollars are being spent and if they're being spent wisely. So as we talk about this budget for next year of $6.8 billion, what can we tell the taxpayers about what the important priorities are within that budget?
Well, it's an enormous amount of money. I hope the taxpayers know that we're talking about educating 480,000 students with 50,000 faculty members and other staff. So if you divide all that, you can see that it's a very efficient by person. But our top priority is to offer our students an excellent, rigorous education that really prepares them for the future. And from my perspective, that means prepares them to keep learning so that they can be available to all the new jobs that we haven't even thought about. So and then also to get them out within 4 years if they're on that path. And that's important because we need room in our universities for the next wave of students, and also because every year they stay, it's more expensive, and we're trying to avoid saddling them with excessive debt. So certainly, you know, the top priority for us is educating students in the best way possible and making sure we don't put any barriers in front of them for a 4-year graduation rate or a 3.5-year graduation rate if that's on their agenda, or in 5 years.
So what I'm hearing is that the goal here is to get as many students in and through the system and as well educated as possible in the shortest amount of time.
I think that captures it, because we are the economic engine of California. When you think that we graduate 100,000 students a year into the economy, and some go to graduate school, some go right into professions. They're the artists, the engineers, the teachers, the law enforcement people, the scientists. This is what really fuels our economy. I think we have a stat at the system level that 1 in 5 Californians have at least 1 degree from California State University. So our footprint across the state is huge, and you know, the future depends on an educated, I'd say, innovation force. People not just prepared narrowly for a particular job, because as you know, these jobs are disappearing. Some of the futurists say software is eating the world. So how do we prepare students to be ready, not just to meet the future, but to really lead the future?
As we talk about the cost factor, we mentioned tuition. Tuition went up last year for the first time in about 5 or 6 years. The CSU does not take tuition increases lightly. And in fact, there is an act that was passed by the state legislature called the Working Family Student Fee Transparency and Accountability Act. It's a bit of a mouthful.
Yes.
But what does that actually mean, and what does that require the CSU to do before raising tuition?
Yes, it's an excellent approach. I think it requires the CSU, the Chancellor, the Board of Trustees to notify students and thus their families, I think in November of a current academic year, if they're even considering tuition increase for the following fall. And in fact, that happened again this year, that the system-wide student group, CSSA, was notified in November or December that this would be at first an information item and then perhaps an action item. So it's meant to give families, both of prospective students, a chance to understand what the real cost would be, and current students about how they might have to budget for the additional $200. I think last year the increase was about $270, $280, and so give people almost a whole year to figure out, you know, how to do that.
So they'll have a chance to prepare for that and plan for that.
Yes, and of course nothing is decided as yet. It's up to the Board of Trustees. There'll be lots of discussion and lots of seeking for alternative sources, but you know, what the public may not understand, given the immense number of dollars that we talk about, is that in actual dollars, in the 3 out of the last 4 years, our budget has decreased, and that's because we haven't kept up with inflation in terms of the increases. We have given our faculty and staff well-deserved raises. They hadn't gotten raises forever. And as every family knows, the price of everything has gone up. So we've actually been in a negative situation. And I know that's hard to grasp when we're talking, you know, billions of dollars, but we are talking about the largest state university system in the country, perhaps in the world.
Even so, with the fee increases and so forth, we're still talking about an education at Cal State Long Beach which costs about $6,500 a year, not including room and board,
right,
which is still a really good bargain compared to other state university systems around the country. And if we add in what's called the Social Mobility Index, it's an even greater bargain.
Yes.
What is the Social Mobility Index, and why do we on this campus rate as number 5 in the country on that index?
I'm really proud of that ranking. You know, we're ranked from a number of different perspectives, but that's one of my favorites. What that looks at is the demographic and economic profile of a campus. And so what percent of the students come to this campus from lower economic, you know, even disadvantaged or stressed economic situations, and then what percent 5 years after graduation actually have moved way up. They're not in the bottom quartile anymore, maybe they're in the 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 4. And so we look so good on that index because at least almost 50% of our students are on Pell Grants, which indicate a high degree of economic need. But yet, 5 years after graduation, we were recently ranked as having one of the highest 5-year salaries of $98,000 a year. Now, compare that to a school that takes in people who are already very affluent. So they may also be making $98,000 a year 5 years after graduation, but they came in making that. So the social mobility is the change in earning power, essentially. But of course, when you change earning power, you change a whole lot of other things in a person's life. But the change in earning power, that can be attributed to the college experience.
And how does that impact the community as well? As you were saying, when you change that dynamic, it changes a lot of other things that has a ripple effect on everything else.
I think that's a very important question because people can imagine, and I hear it in a national narrative, that college education is a private good. Well, it's good for you. It's good for your development. That's true, but also it's very good for your community. It means that you'll have a job, you'll be paying taxes, your health will be better, so you'll be less dependent on health resources. Your chances of being incarcerated or get in trouble with the law are much lower. Your civic engagement, that is your voting, your probability of voting will be much higher. So having the educational attainment increase at the community level really enriches the whole community, whether or not the other members have gone to higher ed. And in fact, with women, especially when a woman gets a college education, the probability for her children to expect and actually go to college increases dramatically. So here we have not just a at one generation change, but we have the chance for multi-generational changes.
So we're raising the expectations all the way along the road.
That's right.
What about the idea of remedial courses and the fact that we're making some changes about that as well?
Yes.
I think we can refer to them as ramp-up courses, if you will, to help with the college readiness process.
Sure.
If you could talk about that for a moment and what's happening with the CSU to try to improve that process.
Yes. So we, fortunately at Long Beach, we were a little bit ahead of the curve on that, but there's been national research for now decades illustrating that when you put a student who comes to your college, you've admitted that student, you've said, welcome, come on in, and then you say to them, oh gee, you're not really quite ready, you're going to have to take this English course but no credit, maybe this math course but no credit. So this turns out to be a double whammy in a way because many students don't pass those so-called remedial courses. It adds time to their degree, adds expense, and it discourages them from continuing. So the persistence rate among freshmen who are put into ramp-up or remedial courses has been terrible. You know, our freshman persistence rate to sophomore year is 90%, but if you look at those who were put in those kinds of non-credit bearing courses, it's much, much lower. So our strategy is to create courses. Maybe they're taught differently. It comes with tutoring, it comes with maybe more people in the room, or it comes with electronic enhancements so students can listen to podcasts about what the lecture has been. And maybe it'll take a year rather than one semester, but that they will earn credit for that. And the national research and our own research here illustrates that when we do that, students rise to the occasion overwhelmingly. We have an equal opportunity program. Students in that are usually from the most economically disadvantaged situations. And if the student really engages with equal opportunity, their graduation rate is 92%. So it's not about the student, it's about the supports and the pedagogies we use to help a student learn and really accelerate their learning so that they catch up and they even up with other students.
So the early start and the changes in the curriculum will help to keep those students in the pipeline more effectively than we've been able to do before.
Right. It'll cost less, it'll be faster, it'll be more effective.
On that note, we have to go to the break right now. And when we come back from the break, we'll continue this conversation about new developments at Cal State Long Beach coming up in the next year. Stay tuned.
Should your company buy or sell, expand or not, relocate, or simply stay the same? If you'd like to examine past and present predictions, integrating finances and people, and make future predictions based on all that information, a career in economics is for you. You can become a part of this exciting field with a degree from Cal State Long Beach.
Welcome back to In Conversation. I'm Dave Kelly, and my guest today is Dr. Jane Close Conoley, the president of Cal State Long Beach. Dr. Conoley, as we start this second segment, let's talk about something that has become a national issue of late, and that is the freedom of speech and the debate over freedom of speech on college campuses. And there have been some surveys that have been done, very credible surveys, that indicate that the millennial generation, and of course college students, which are part of the millennial generation, about 40% of them do not fully comprehend, grasp, or accept that the Constitution, the First Amendment of the Constitution, provides a very wide latitude for all manner of speech, including speech which we would consider to be offensive or even hateful.
Yes.
Now, obviously, there are limits. For example, if there are true threats or direct threats to individuals or groups that are targeted for violence, etc., that's not allowed. Also, people can't just randomly stand up in a crowded theater and shout fire because of the public safety issues and so on. But other than those kinds of restrictions, the First Amendment is very broad. Students have objected to that, and they have said, we think the government or the university, which is a representative of the government, should have the ability to prohibit or restrict speech. How can universities, educational institutions, implement and explain about the First Amendment and all of its parameters and still encourage an environment of civil debate? That's a tough question.
It is a tough question, and I can say what we're doing. I don't think we have discovered a panacea or some kind of, absolute sure way to do it. Our approach has been to offer lots of training in First Amendment. What does it really mean? And these have been in small focus groups and large town halls and aimed at faculty, staff, and students, because it's not just the students who are questioning this part of our Constitution. And part of their argument, by the way, is this is the same Constitution that allowed slavery. This is the same Constitution that disallowed women from voting. So why are you putting it in front of me as, absolute law? But it is absolute law, So we're trying, because we're educators, our first approach is education. The other is so much messaging that we send out, and then also structuring other activities where we could promote a debate, and we hope a civil debate. The faculty have been great at that, at structuring that within their classes. Does it always work? No. I mean, there's been some very tense situations that have arisen, but I think we can't sit back and just think it's, somehow a light bulb's going to go on. Because we're an educational institution, we have to keep providing structures and information and simulations and real life things, and then I have to be the one, and others, of course, when hateful, obnoxious, reprehensible speech comes to our campus, which it has, I need to call that and name it and say, you're free to say it, but it's not welcome here. This does not represent our values. So, I see myself as a touchstone for, you're free, but this is not who we are. We aspire to be something very different. So I think it's like the educational process. It's going to go on and on and on. And I think you do mention a danger of students thinking, okay, I'll just hang out with my group, whether that's politically the same or ethnically the same or sexual identity the same, to avoid those difficult, really challenging viewpoints. And so we have to figure out ways to get students and faculty and staff to mix it up and find out that they really can talk about these things without condemning the person for beliefs. It's a difficult thing because we don't see that at the national level. So there's not many good models for it. So we're trying to create the models here.
As you mentioned, the comfort zones that people tend to retreat to when they feel challenged, and that's kind of a normal instinctive reaction. And it is sort of a bit of an oxymoron that we want diversity, yet when we encourage diverse voices, there's a lot of passion there that comes with those diverse voices, and that passion tends to cause people to retreat back to those same comfort zones that we've been talking about.
Yeah. So I think that's why we have to keep talking about the benefit of diversity, and we've established on our campus a commission, a special president's commission on inclusive excellence, where the point is to find perhaps those hot spots or those difficult areas of belief systems and structure activities. We're also trying to get a baseline for campus climate and get people to share their stories. I'm always amazed at how all of us, and we can fall into this, and I think you've alluded to this, is I look at you, you're a white man in a suit, and I'm going to decide, well, you've always had it easy, you know. And I don't get to know you, and I don't understand your struggles what's been your path to get where you are now. I think the more we would seek that information out, the more empathy we would develop for one another, the more understanding. We might still disagree, we might still vote for different people or hold different religious beliefs, but we wouldn't be hateful and obnoxious or even violent to one another. We'd kind of get it, that we're all on a path together, and our best strategy is to help each other along.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a phrase that we've known in this country for many, many years, e pluribus unum, from the many one. Mm-hmm. Can we get to that point?
I think we can, in terms of very high-level values. We value peace, we value civility. I don't think we can ask successfully people to give up heritage differences. In fact, there's pretty substantial research that your mental health is improved if you understand the strengths of your ancestors, your heritage, your particular culture. But you said it well before, that as we've encouraged diversity, it's become more complicated because everybody wants not only a place at the table, and everybody's invited, but they want their viewpoint. And they have to learn there's a certain relativism to I do it this way, you do it that way. And we've made progress as a nation. I would say, even in my lifetime, along those dimensions, but we have a long way to go. And we constantly have the rise of, now we have the rise again of a neo-Nazi kind of fascist American or white nativism that is just totally unacceptable to an e pluribus unum perspective and to our American Constitution.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's move on to something more cheery, and that is actually where we're going with job preparation. We talked earlier about the Social Mobility Index and the fact that we're preparing people from diverse communities to rise up and to contribute to the economy. I know that former Chancellor Reed used to say repeatedly, and I know I interviewed him several times where he said this, for every tax dollar that goes into the CSU system, about $5 comes out into the economy. So that's where we're going with this. You also brought up the fact that software is quote unquote eating the world because we are in a software driven economy. We've done some shows about that too.
Yeah.
And so how do we manage this general education system that we're running here? How do we prepare for what's down the road in the global economy?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, it's a tough question, but I think that we certainly have professional programs where a student comes in and says, I want to be a teacher, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a nurse. But within each of those areas, the actual job demands and possibilities and modifications have been dramatic over the years. It's like thinking of, I want to be a librarian. Well, librarians today don't do what librarians did 60 years ago, but we still have libraries and need them, and librarians, and we need them very vitally. So I think what we aspire to always is to say our students leave us, certainly with some professional skills, if that's the direction they've gone, but they have great written communication, they have great oral communication. They are critical thinkers. They can, and they know how to research. They know how to find things out, and they're not susceptible to ideological, just, glosses. Well, we all think this way. And so to me, that's very, very, very important. And most employers agree with us on that they want people with certainly some professional skills, but they're also looking, can you work on a team? Can you compromise? Can you collaborate? Can you initiate? So those are things that we are very self-consciously and purposefully putting into the curriculum. They've been there for quite a while, of course, but really talking about it more so that as new professors join us, they understand, and that the students actually understand, this is something that I need to work on.
And it's interesting how that brings together the understanding of the cultural differences that occur from diversity. If people are prepared for that, it makes them better as a team player.
Oh, that's a good point. Absolutely right, because they must anticipate that in this global world, they need to be successful not only with our own domestic ethnic groups and other groups, but with a global community. And that's part of our strong strategy around international education, to have more and more of our students have a chance to do that.
We're starting to run out of time, so I've got a couple of other questions I want to run by you. The first one has to do with connections with alumni and partnerships. Let's talk about some partnerships that are forming. Of course, we have a mayor that's a former student body president here.
Very lucky about that. Yeah.
In Long Beach, and we're talking about a downtown village, a CSULB downtown village. What is that village and what would it entail?
The idea is that we are partnered with some downtown developers in two areas actually, and that there would be affordable housing for students, faculty, and staff, as well as gallery space and classroom space. And so it would ease the transition of some faculty and staff who come to Long Beach, which is a very high rent or very high housing prices, and also give our students, and this would be limited to students 21 and older, a chance to actually live in the downtown and experience the advantages of that. And this will have an express bus that would come, to campus, and so we think it will provide our students with a new and invigorating lifestyle, ease the transition for faculty and staff, and offer the downtown community some of our great assets, like part of our University Art Museum, some classes, some galleries, and it might spark our ability to start some new programs for working adults downtown.
We only have about 30 seconds left. In that time, can you tell us some new developments that are going to occur on campus? I think you mentioned me something about Fridays and Saturdays.
Might be some new scheduling. We're working on that really hard, just to make sure that parking is not such a bottleneck for everybody. We'll be opening our new building for our College of Continuing and Professional Education. And by January of next year, our new Student Success Center will be open, which is a complete renovation of an existing and actually kind of original building, the Peterson building. And so we're very excited. All of these aimed at increasing educational opportunities and really transformational opportunities for our students and making sure they connect to the services we offer.
So the future is bright, and we're moving forward.
The future is bright, and we have to, though, always remember we make the future. So we're not waiting for something to happen. So we're trying really hard to be part of creating the situation, the financial situation, and the engagement situation, that we're all in this together.
And thank you for being here today. This has been very informative.
Well, thank you, Dave. I appreciate it.
Sure. And thank you for joining us for this edition of In Conversation. Join us again soon for the next episode. Until then, I'm Dave Kelly. Have a nice day.